All right, guys. Welcome to the Sunday night Mac Forum video chat. Um, Hopefully, we'll get this thing kicked off here. Have a nice evening. Uh, don't have a real hard set agenda today, but a couple things I wanted to just briefly mention. We've had several new members over the last week in the forum. Welcome aboard to all of you. A couple of them have kind of stirred the pot a little bit in the forum and created a couple of interesting threads. Part of this cast is based in part on this threads that were started by a new member, Granny Sue Snaps, because it deals with the basic issues surrounding the Supreme Court decision and on internet privacy and search warrants, but mainly not so much going to talk about the specifics of the decision because I'm not a lawyer, nor do I play one on television, obviously. But there's something that it got me to thinking in terms about the general idea of internet privacy and what you can and cannot do about it. I mean, not just in terms of internet privacy, but technological privacy in general. Your ability to keep things to yourself. Now, we all know by now, or most of us know, that there are a number of companies that have found a way to, for lack of a better word, monetize your personal information. You tell them certain things about yourself, and that information, they either use that information to sell you additional stuff. That's not necessarily new, in the sense that businesses for a long time have kept customer lists. They used to do it, send out mail flyers and circulars in the days before computers. That's not new. What is new is that the computer allows this to be done on a massive scale and very easily, and be able to search that database and cross-correlate it with other things. And also, one of the things that it's allowed companies to do is to take that information and pass it on to other companies for a fee, of course. Okay, and you don't necessarily know when they do that. Now, most companies, when you start doing business with them, when you open an account on a forum, when you do business with a company that you're buying from, they all have some type of privacy agreement describing to you what they do with your personal information and under what circumstances they can do it. Now, I suspect that very few of us actually read those agreements, in the sense that we don't bother to read in detail, who they're sharing the information with, what that information can be used for, etc., etc., etc. Nor do we pay attention to any changes that are made in the terms of service, in the privacy agreement and terms of service. We usually don't pay attention until we get some email that says you have violated this term of service or that term of service, whatever. And there's a problem. There are a couple of problems that have started to creep into net use and computer use in recent years. Now, in the old days, before computers were connected to the internet, there's a lot of information that you filled out on your personal computer And if you filled out any kind of marketing information, it had to be mailed back to the company. You had a little bit of control over that. And then all of a sudden, you started seeing, with the advent of the internet, and I've been on the internet since the days of Mosaic, Netscape Communicator 4. That gives you an idea how long I've been on the net. And initially, there wasn't a lot of tracking going on in terms of internet tracking of the users, not only in terms of tracking where they went, but other kinds of information. And then gradually you saw sites using cookies to track where people went on the site, to remember people that had been there before. And that can be set to do all kinds of convenient things, like remember your password when you log into a form. And that's kind of convenient, so as users, we say, okay, you can do that, we'll let you do that. Well, now you can not only do that, but you can track a wealth of information, where users go, in terms of if they've been on your site browsing for something. Say they're about to make a purchasing decision. They've been on your site browsing for something. Okay, you know which pages they have browsed, what they might be looking for, and you can then pass that information, take it, filter it in various ways, and use it to market something. You know, Amazon is really good at that to some extent. I can guarantee you that if you go onto Amazon's site and you search for a piece of music, even if you don't buy that piece of music, within a matter of a day or so, you're going to get an email letting you know what similar kinds of music is available. And that's, we generally don't mind that, because sometimes it tells us about something that we didn't know about. The problem is that same technology allows the information, and I'm not saying that all companies do this, but some certainly do, and it's the principal way that they make money. The information that is gleaned can be compiled, analyzed in a variety of ways, and then passed off and sold to other people. And that I think is the thing that most users are not aware of. And it's a, to me, it's kind of a troubling issue because of how little control you have over what's done with that information. And of course, the other side of that kind of tracking and information is that what you do on the internet is certainly becoming an issue. There have been a handful of reports over the last year or two of employers asking prospective employees for the passwords to their Facebook pages, Twitter feeds, etc. They kind of want to get a look and find out what you're into. In some cases, users have said, go ahead, and okay, I don't have anything to be embarrassed by. But that puts you in a very weird position for two reasons. One, first and foremost, and of the most temporary problem, many of these services say that if you share your password with someone and something happens as a result of that someone having that password, you're responsible for it. So you share your password with somebody. They go up and make changes to your Facebook page, put things on there that violate the TOS, that kind of thing. You're responsible for that behavior, even though you personally didn't do it. But that's not the consequence that has some people more curious. The one that has people a little bit more curious is when it comes to things like employment. What happens if you share your password with the employer and you post something somewhere that that the employer didn't approve of. There's big discussion about how that's handled legally. I think that's going to be an ongoing discussion. It's one of those things that doesn't just go away, and is going to change as the law changes. And we as users, I think, are going to have to stay on top of what the law is saying and advocating in terms of what we would like for the law to say, because it's not a foregone conclusion that First Amendment law always applies in all cases, particularly in those situations where the person doing this and using the information is not a government entity. There's some question as to what ramifications there would be. Somebody gets a hold of looks at something on your Facebook page, they see something they don't approve of, and so they, start advocating that something should happen to you. They didn't say, the First Amendment law may or may not apply, in part because the government didn't say you can't publish this or you should be punished for publishing it. Some other group, some advocacy group got hold of it, or some person, some individual. So those are some issues that I think we're going to have to all pay a little closer attention to, and perhaps be a little more circumspect in terms of what information we share with others. Hopefully that discussion will keep going in the forum. If you have not looked at it already, take a look at the one devoted to the recent Supreme Court ruling on search and seizure and police seizure of your cell phone and its subsequent data. What that ruling, for me, essentially seems to do is to codify something that a lot of people had already thought. I think there were a lot of people that thought that surely if they confiscate your phone, they must have a search warrant to search through the content, to search your contacts, search your email, search anything you might have. And that was partly based in terms of other expectations about search warrants for financial data, etc. So it's kind of going to be interesting to see how that decision plays out going forward. I think it codified some privacy expectations that a lot of people have. Question is, will it be applied to other things, and in what ways? What are the exceptions? As always, part of the important thing going forward is going to be, what are the exceptions? Under what circumstances is a warrant not required? That's going to be an interesting decision to play forward coming in the next couple of months. Another thing that I saw just before I started the chat tonight, it's kind of interesting to me personally, but also maybe of interest to you. It's interesting to me for two reasons. Let me give you an idea of what happened. Earlier this week, Reuters ran a story which implied that some advocates for the blind and visually impaired were ticked off at Apple, in part because more apps in the App Store aren't better accessible to visually impaired users with vision impairments. Now, that article went on to give some examples, things that are not necessarily the most accessible. They briefly hinted at that, but the problem with the article is that it's a little bit misleading. In terms of the discussion, essentially seems to be the problem. The headline gives you the impression that they are ticked off with Apple's accessibility efforts specifically. That's not the whole of the store. The discussion is more focused on app development and app store. Apple has guidelines for making apps accessible to people with disabilities. The question was, how far would Apple go in terms of forcing a developer to make? That's what the meat of the whole discussion was. But the article itself, particularly the headline of it, is a little bit misleading because it implies that they're all immediately ticked off. When in reality, about 2 days later, the president of the National Federation of the Blind, president of the NFB, National Federation of the Blind, chimed into the debate with a very lengthy blog post praising Apple for its work on accessibility. He did point out that more could be done to improve the accessibility of apps in the App Store in the future. And it suggested that maybe one of the ways around that would be to have Apple work with app developers to make the 1 million plus apps in the App Store more accessible for all users. The only reason I put those two articles together is the NFB president's reaction is a little closer to the debate that seems to be going on. The headline of the Reuters story seems to be a little bit misleading. You would think that every user, every disabled user, every user with an exceptionality is ticked off at Apple because of various App Store apps and the level of accessibility. That's not entirely true. What is closer to truth is that there are people within the advocacy community who think that more can be done to make apps more accessible to people with exceptionalities. And yes, some of that leadership is going to come from Apple. They've always been, almost from the beginning with the Apple IIs, them and some of the more well-known third-party developers have been involved with efforts to make the computer more accessible. That's an important issue, both in terms of people who have exceptionalities, and also as the population ages and gets closer to retirement, maybe has vision issues and needs problems with this, or has difficulty with typing and needing some alternative means of interacting with the keyboard and with the computer. Not all of that leadership has to come from Apple or needs to. I don't think one company needs to always be the one that we look to in that respect. When you put yourself in that position, you're always kind of at the whim of what that one company wants to do. But it doesn't help the discussion to have some of the stories that are available be a little misleading about what is expected and what's needed in an certainly, I think Apple, even Apple will tell you, Tim Cook's made some comments in the past about how committed they are to accessibility. And we've seen in the evolution, particularly of the iDevices, that there have been changes in that. So keep an eye on that. It's an interesting read. I'll post a link to both of the stories in just a little bit. I find it hard to do that when I'm talking to you, so look for them after the show and in the forum thread. The other thing that caught my attention this week, other than some of the discussions on privacy and accessibility, one of the other things that kind of caught my attention is, already we're seeing some things about the 10.10 with Yosemite A couple of people have, said, I put it on, it crashed. Okay, have a hard time. It's betaware, people. That's going to happen. And I'm not making an excuse for Apple, but it is betaware. As far as I know, the public beta has not hit yet. That's one area that we in the forum are not really in a position to help a whole lot with right now, because we don't have access to the betas unless we're part of the developer program. I'm not. There may be some members that are, but one of the functions of the developer program is a non-disclosure agreement that won't discuss the issues about what's included, what's not included, etc., etc., etc. So that's going to pose some interesting topics going forward. I know that there's a ton of discussion on some sites about the quote-unquote, for lack of a better word, iWatch. Okay, I have no doubt that Apple is probably working on some type of device. That's just my opinion. Okay, when you look at some of the technology and apps that they talked about during the keynote that have to deal with health monitoring of things like blood pressure, etc., 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 it's almost a given that they're going to have something. What it is, I don't know. When it will be here, I don't know. Would not surprise me if they're not already close. Okay? But that's not the thing. It opens up, once again, as new technology or improvements on existing technology come into play, it's going to raise additional concerns about privacy. Somebody gets a hold of the device, how easy is it to access that health information? Who has the right to see that? Who doesn't? That can have some significant implications in terms of ability to get insurance, affordability of insurance, things of that nature. So as we move forward with newer and newer pieces of technology and technology into areas of our life that had not been there before, we're coming back again to the what information is mine, what am I allowed to do with it, what is someone else allowed to do with it. A couple of other things that came up that were kind of interesting this week, at least interesting for me anyway. A couple of our members posted some really interesting troubleshooting techniques that are, really not necessarily techniques, but problems that they were having that just puzzling us. Thanks for the challenge, guys. Like I say, we're going to, in the coming weeks, I'll be including more in the way of Mac tips and tricks, iOS tips and tricks into the Sunday show. Hopefully some of our members will kick in with some of their favorites. I noticed that one of my favorite sites, the Macworld Hints sites, that used to be Mac OS X Hints, the number of hints has kind of slowed down there on that site. And some of the hints that have been shown, or just on that type of site, you get all kinds of things. You get that really basic, all the way up to very advanced, very, for lack of a better word, tricky type hints. So we'll try to get more of those going in the coming weeks. Maybe I'll be able to develop a backlog of stuff. As you can tell, I didn't get the blog entry written this week. We're going to try to get back on track with that. It's been a while since I did any writing for the blog. Hopefully I'll find something really interesting. If you've got an idea, PM me through the forum. But the rest of the week has been things here and there. That one of the things I'm starting to get back interested in again is what are other users doing with their machines, with their Macs? Because I've hit a phase right now where I am, for the most part, doing kind of the same things over and over. Haven't really done anything creative in a while. It's kind of going, to more of a routine kind of thing. So if you hit on an idea that you think people need to explain, give me a yell. Let me know. Post it somewhere. I'll be kind of interested to see what some of you are doing that's really creative. Maybe we can feature some of them in an up-and-coming show. I want to be sure I point out to you, though, too, what are the things that I've mentioned before. I want to be sure that some of our listeners, maybe that didn't catch it before, understand. One of the best troubleshooting techniques that you can have at your disposal is to have a second account, a second administrative account established on your Mac. There has to be at least one. But one of the best things that you can do is to have a second one and have that second account be an administrator account and keep it clean. In other words, do not add a bunch of junk into it. Just pretty much keep it as clean as you can, because what you will do there is, let's say that you start having problems with some aspect of your machine. One of the very first troubleshooting things that you would like to establish is this problem that I'm experiencing something that is affecting only my account, or is it affecting the entire machine? Now, if you've been troubleshooting quite a bit in computers, and specifically with Macs and the way they handle multiple user accounts, you may realize almost immediately, okay, this tends to be an ongoing problem that's affecting the whole machine, or this tends to be a problem that is affecting a single account. But if you're relatively new to troubleshooting Macs, or relatively new to troubleshooting computers in general, then that may be a little harder to figure out. And so logging into a second account that has been cleaned gives you an idea. Because if the problem is in one account, does not affect the other account, then there is a distinct possibility that the cause of the problem is some piece of software or corrupted file that exists in the main account and isn't in the secondary. Whereas if it's affecting both accounts, then it may well be something that is in the system folder, or at least some other problem that's affecting the entire machine. Maybe some hardware problem or something else that's affecting the entire machine. So having a second account gets you well on the way to answering that kind of question. Enabling the guest account does not do that, because the guest account does not have the kind of access privileges that you need to do some of the types of troubleshooting activities that you would like. A guest account is deliberately crippled for situations where you are, say, loaning your computer to someone, or someone else is using your computer, and you want to limit the possibility that they can do damage, either directly or inadvertently. It's possible to inadvertently delete things, and the guest account cuts down on that possibility. One of the things the guest account does, for the most part, is clean up after itself. When somebody logs out, that stuff, the files that are created, cache files, all those things are cleaned up and removed. So if you ever find that you log into a Mac on a guest account and you have a file that you want to save, you probably need to put it on a USB drive or external hard drive or something, because when you log out of that account, those files are going to be gone. Also remember one other thing that I've seen now and I've helped somebody with a couple of times, not just on the forum, but just here and there. Remember that now One of the comments that seems to throw people occasionally is gatekeeper. When they double click on an installer and the file says it can't be installed because it's not from a trusted source. That does not mean that your software can only come from the App Store. That's a misconception that some people have. The App Store is certainly a pretty good place to get software. There are some advantages and some disadvantages to getting software that way, but it doesn't mean the software can only come from the App Store. In fact, there are some well-known, well-respected programs that are not in the App Store at the moment for various reasons. But gatekeeper settings are in the security and privacy section of your Mac and system preferences. And in order to change those, you're going to have to enter a password to change that. They are included in the general section, in the general tab of security and privacy pane. And I suppose we've spent a good deal of time talking about privacy, but one of the other things to pay attention to with privacy and security issues is when you're installing software, what access are you giving to the software? For example, Flash. One of the options is to allow it to have access to your camera. That allows certain sites with certain types of coding to have access to your eyesight camera. Now, that's not in and of itself a bad thing, but I think that it behooves you as the owner to decide, do I want this? So after you make an install, make a change, go in and check to see that that setting is set the way you want it. I'm not saying the companies are doing anything nefarious. I'm simply saying it's one of the things that we need to check and keep an eye on every once in a while and pay careful attention to. And this is one of the things that I think probably the least amount of attention is paid by a lot of people, because we do have to enter the password when we're installing most software, so we think, okay, they're not up to anything sneaky. And there's a difference between malicious and privacy. A piece of malicious code would do something harmful to the computer or something like that, or gather information without you knowing about it, gaining access without you knowing about it. The fact that some versions of the Flash installer, people have not noticed that the camera setting was set to allow access, doesn't necessarily mean that anybody was up to anything sneaky, but it does give those people who are one more avenue to gather information. And you have some control over that as the user. Exercise it. I want to just finally, just real quickly, because I'm going to call it quits here in just a minute, give a good shout out to all the new people that have come in. We've had some interesting discussions going. If you've been lurking and you haven't joined before now, I encourage you to do so. We always like to have new people and have them contributing. And some of our new members have contributed some interesting things to the troubleshooting discussions, and certainly contributed some interesting things in the solutions department, so keep up the good work. Our forum mods are constantly kept busy trying to make sure that we have a nice place, a nice comfortable place where people can feel comfortable and make up a lot of their ask questions, answer questions without getting any kind of negative reaction or repercussions, things of that nature. Coming up this week, I promise to have some other ideas for the next show, possibly have the topics up a day or so ahead of time so you have time to think about it. And just because we don't have, just because a topic isn't on the list doesn't mean it won't make it in the show. I do like to keep a little bit of spontaneity around. So just because something isn't there in the list doesn't mean that it won't be there. So probably look about Friday or Saturday for some kind of update about what's going to be on the next show. Maybe an update about what tips might be there. I'm going to try to get back to something that I had gotten off of a little bit. Initially, my intention was to have on most shows one Mac tip, one iOS device type tip, and one kind of general computing tip in each show. Don't know if I'll make it that way, but we'll see. I'd like to try to get back into that kind of a framework. So we'll let you know. Until then, I hope that you've enjoyed this little discussion about internet privacy. And one of the things that I've liked about the Mac is that we do have a little bit more control over what goes on the systems. It does require us to be a little vigilant, but hey, it works pretty well. Hopefully you'll get your friends and neighbors talking about this and discussing what level of privacy you have. Because that's where this is going to start, when a lot of people start saying, I think we need more law to control this, or I think this is what this means. Maybe our public officials need to put a little more time and energy into thinking about internet privacy. So hopefully you'll get not just internet privacy, but technological privacy in general. So we'll try to keep that discussion going and maybe add a few other interesting ones in the coming week. And until next week, this is your buddy Sly Dude. I will see you next week and hope that you enjoyed this little discussion. Look for you next week. I'll look forward to seeing you. Until then, have a good week.